Hi, I know the title of this video will sound audacious to some, but bear with me and let me present the evidence. Also, I have 20 years of archaeological experience in this region, as well as 13 years of experience prospecting in southern New Mexico. I am familiar with these mines as well as many others in southern New Mexico. I've done lots of research on all of them, and I've looked at them on Google Earth for hundreds of hours looking for every little feature I could find. I'm going to be showing you three mines today. They're north of Hatch quite a ways, out in the middle of nowhere. They're at the top of the screen in this picture. The first of these is the Palm Park mine, and then the Prickly Pear mine, and finally the Horseshoe deposit. These are all supposed to be, I assume, fluorite mines. The Palm Park mine runs along the west slope of this mountain range. The southern part is kind of in a little valley. The mine runs up this ridge that has mineralization that's kind of pinkish in this picture. It contains fluorite, barite, quartz, and some other odd minerals, but nothing more than that. What we know about this mine is that it was first discovered in the 1920s. So this mine was already there when people came out and recorded it. Now, people probably saw it earlier than that, but that's the first miner geologist that reported it in a journal or an article, something like that. Other than that, this mine has never been under production that we know of. In 1978 and 79, people went out and drilled some boreholes and put some unpatented claims on the mine, but I don't think those claims were ever kept up. There's no sign that this mine was ever producing anything other than the large amounts of disturbance there. Again, I've been to this mine several times, and it has these strange features. Kind of basin shaped. Two of them are kind of stepped down at the south end of the mine, and then there's these two really deep holes farther up the ridge. Lots of big piles of rock, really disturbed. I'm going to start down here at the bottom though. There are these three reservoirs along the road. They don't hold much water. They're not down in the arroyo where you would get water, so you would have to run water to them from somewhere. I guess perhaps a windmill, but there's not a windmill there. When you first enter the mine from the south, the first thing you notice is this big hill. And it's a couple of shallow basins terraced down the hill. And then there's a 20-foot mound of dirt at the bottom of it. You can see I'm standing on the hill here, and it's straight across to the mountainside where it's disturbed on the east side. As we look back up to the north to the rest of the mine, you can see all this just jumble of material in these big hills. It's full of large boulders. But if you look at it from above, you can actually see there's these two basins dug out. They're about 20 feet deep. And all the material around it built up are, again, big boulders full of barite and quartz and such. And the hills down below are also quite high. One of them, again, is about 20-25 feet high. Also, you'll note that there are some regular scraping patterns to the top of this picture. And as you move up the road, you find again there's these areas that have this really regular scraping pattern to it. And if you get all the way up towards the top of the mine, you can look back and see this scraped area we were just looking at. But then there's another one here that's a round shape. Again, it looks like a real regular pattern that someone pushed out. As you move north up the mine, there are also these roads or cuts going up into the limestone part of the mountain where there's not even any mineralization. And as you move around to the north of the same mountain ridge, you'll see lots of kind of roads winding all over the place, kind of going to nowhere, except this one has a disturbance at the end of it. And if you look back at the mountain again, there's these really big cuts into the side of this limestone hill that has no mineralization at all. So that's a quick tour of the Palm Park mine. Now I'm going to move a little bit more to the northeast to this kind of smaller ridge line, and there's two mines here that I've been to also. The first is the Prickly Pear mine. Here there's this low brownish hill that's been scraped and disturbed. The only thing I found here was quartz. There might be trace amounts of fluorite. There's probably also barite, I forget. But there's these shafts out here, and then there's a road going up to the top of the mountain to this rock face. But the main part of the mine on this little brown hill just consists of these odd cuts and these strange rake marks. And on the north slope, or north of the mine on the slope of this hill, it appears to be cleared. Here are a couple shots of the shafts in the area. These are on the topo map. They appear to be out in nowhere. There's no rock outcrops or mineralization, any way to tell what you would be hitting if you dug these. Anyway, I adjusted the color on this one just to kind of show what this mine looks like. That whole hill is covered with prickly pear, thus the name. Thicker than I've probably seen anywhere before. And finally, a quick tour of the Horseshoe deposit. It's another series of trenches and pits and scraped areas that are in a deposit that has very little. There's some quartz and barite, tiny amount of fluorite. Here are the few of the features that I'm labeled for you. There are a couple roads that come down off this hill that are cut all the way down to the rock, real straight, and they're also lined with rock. Here's a picture of one of the cuts. There were these rocks on top of this that I didn't understand why somebody would stack them there if they were working inside this. I didn't like them. I actually knocked a couple of them down so they wouldn't come down on my head. And here's a closer look of those roads that come down that are lined with rock, and they don't actually look like they've been driven on. I'm sure some four-wheel drivers have. There's other disturbed areas there too. So that's a quick tour of the Horseshoe mine. There's a shaft here too, down a little ways onto the alluvial slope. Again, no mineralization here that you could ever see. Now I'm going to go back to the Palm Park mine and show you what I think is going on here. First, let's look at what we know. There's no minerals of value here. No minerals appear to have been removed. Most of the material that you see dug up is still piled up here. There's these huge amount of labor invested, even with modern equipment. There's these large basins and large piles of dirt. Those piles of dirt, you couldn't pile that up with a backhoe. You would need a crane. They're so high up. There's those three basins on the road. The northern part, there's roads to nowhere. Roads cut up into the part of the hill where there's no mineralization. And then isolated square shafts in areas with no known minerals. And if you haven't noticed, this mine appears to form a giant parrot. I'll show you what I mean if you haven't seen it, kind of like that. So yes, I'm suggesting that this mine is a prehistoric feature and that those roads are prehistoric features outlining these glyphs. And here's what I think they were trying to do with these basins. They were going to probably use the road as a canal, run water from a dam up on the northern part of the wash, run it down into these basins. The overflow from the basins would then continue down into additional basins. And then the part to the south again were basins that would be fed by a wash over there. I believe these cuts in the hills to be places where tombs were going to be constructed or are actually there. And the same in the north. These roads go out to places where tombs were or gonna be or are, or they outline additional glyphs that were gonna be built. And just for kicks, I wanted to show you a few specimens I've collected there. They're pretty. They're hard to find pretty ones there, but altogether they're not worth much money. There's some amethyst, there's some quartz on fluorite, there's quartz on barite, and this is what it looks like out there in those big boulders. There's some really ugly cubes of fluorite and some quartz. Really hard to get to in these boulders. Now let's go back and look at the prickly pear again. I don't know if you noticed, but the brown hill that the mine is on looks an awful lot like a skull. There's these open shafts again in places that they shouldn't be. So I think these were meant to be tombs that nobody was interred in because those people left, were killed somewhere else, something like that. And again, the road up to a thing in the hill again might be a tomb. Finally, back to the horseshoe deposit. This one looks, if it is a glyph, looks like it wasn't as completed as some of the others. But if you look, there are ways you can make various figures, animal faces, even a guy skiing. This is a, believe it or not, kind of glyph that I've seen before. So watch my videos and you'll see some more of those. This is what you find there. Not very nice minerals. There's pockets. You can dig out some big blades of barite, but they're covered with this quartz. Some of it can look okay. Most of it has this coating of chalcedony you can't get off. So nothing very nice there. And definitely nothing of value as a commodity. And then again, we have this shaft out here. It's on the alluvial fan. I noticed that there were all these dark spots that appeared to be in a regular pattern, and that this shaft kind of lines up with all that. So I started looking around, and I think that these also might be tombs where people are actually interred. They left a little basin over them because the people, I believe, did this believed that life begins at water, and therefore it would make sense that it ends at water. So they often have these reservoirs around, and in this case it's just this slight basin in the dirt. If you look real close, you can see that animals burrow in them because it's soft there, but I don't think that this is just a pattern created by animal burrowing. I followed it around on these ridges, and then I came to this glyph here. And it looks like there might again be tombs inside this glyph of an armadillo. And to show you that there's other prehistoric activity out here, I'll zoom in on a field just over to the east of that. And if you look at the valley, this whole Jornada del Muerto, as we call it, you can see that it's all been disturbed. So there was some heavy presence here prehistorically. Now, archaeologists haven't identified it that way. They would say everything is historic. But I'm finding that that's been a false assumption. So you might think I'm crazy, but here's what it looks like. When you go and look at the prickly pear mine, there's all these rake marks. You go out into the middle of that valley and the whole place has been just raked. And in a future video I hope to get to, I'm going to discuss how I believe that this device they use to do all this disturbance is where the term Thunderbird comes from.